Hi, today we are in San Mateo in the local motion office. John, who are you and what do you do?
I'm John Stanfield and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Local Motion, and we build technology for the car sharing industry.
Great. What did you do before you started this company?
It's a great question. My first career was I spent 12 years as a wildland forest firefighter. So after I finished my physics degree, I didn't want to build bombs for the Navy. So I continued doing what I did to put myself through school, and that turned into a career. I exited that, came to the Bay Area, started a couple companies, learned a lot about entrepreneurship. I found myself at graduate school at Stanford, and that's where the idea for this company started out of my master's work in the mechanical engineering group, the design group. And I met my co-founder there, and we started the company in 2010.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the process, how you did come up with this idea?
Sure. So originally we were looking at local mobility and how a third to half of all trips made by Americans are for less than 5 miles. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, we do them in single occupancy, 2,000 to 3,000 pound automobiles. Yeah. And so my idea was to build a small, very efficient electric four-wheel vehicle that was built from the ground up to be shareable, mm-hmm. to occupy a lot of these local needs. And so we built the vehicle, while I was at Stanford, got some attention, won a summer grant from Lightspeed Ventures, mm-hmm. studied the market, realized there was a big gaping hole in mobility that needed to be innovated in and disrupted. And so I launched the company after meeting Clement rock climbing in Yosemite in 2010. Mm-hmm. We then raised some seed money and we built the vehicle, and the idea was to sell it to places and not people, mm-hmm. and be shareable from the ground up in its entirety. The ethos of this vehicle would be a shareable asset. And what we learned in the process was that we could do much greater good and have much greater impact if we separated our ideas and became vehicle agnostic and stopped trying to build cars, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but it takes a lot of money to start a car company. Okay. So we separated the hardware and software that we needed to become vehicle agnostic, and that's what we have today. We install hardware in every vehicle that we deal with. We focus on large groups of assets and fleets across government agencies, from federal, state, and local, to university campuses and corporate campuses.
Okay, great. And how did you get in touch with the first investors?
Let's see. The first investors were visionary angel investors, I would say. We're in the kind of the heart of entrepreneurship here in Silicon Valley. So through my Stanford network, I was put in touch with a great deal of entrepreneurs who had success and are now angel investors. And the Lightspeed Venture grant helped a great deal. So that expanded our network in Silicon Valley, and specifically on Sand Hill Road. Mm-hmm. And so a few, as I call them, visionaries, believed in us and wrote us small checks that allowed us to get started and really push our ideas forward. And without those visionaries, we wouldn't be here today.
Great. John, let's talk about the business model. Can you briefly explain what your solution does and how it works technically, and then talk about the other components, like what customers are you targeting, where are you using this technology, etc.?
Sure. So I strongly believe that shared mobility can never succeed on a large scale unless the experience from the user's perspective at the door of the car when they're accessing that shared mobility, if that experience is better than owning a vehicle, mm-hmm. then shared mobility will succeed. And until that day, it won't expand in a dramatic way. And so the entirety of my company focuses on making that experience superior. And so what we do is we install hardware in every vehicle that shows visually the status of that vehicle to the user. So now when the user walks out to the group of vehicles, they can see through an LED light if the vehicle is available or not. They just walk up with their corporate ID badge that lets them into the buildings, or with their smartphone, touch on the reader, the doors unlock, they get in and they drive away. It's that simple. So you don't have to book your personal car, it's yours. So why would you need to book your shared car? So we give that on-demand, real-time access to every vehicle. You can also step back and say, okay, I'm a planner, which about 3% of our current fleet rides are actually planned ahead of time, only 3 to 5%. And you can go on our mobile app or on our web system, our web-based platform, and book a ride ahead of time. And then what we do is we take all of that information and we analyze it in our own analytics engines, and we give that information back to the fleet managers so that they can make real decisions based on data on how to right size, redistribute, cut costs, and increase utilization. And we just charge per vehicle that our system is installed in. Right now, basically, we take the fleet size, we charge per vehicle, and usually a 12-month subscription fee. And we don't charge for the hardware up front. We actually maintain ownership of the hardware. That way, if we need to replace it, we can.
So from my understanding, in Germany and in Europe in general, we have some kind of companies like BMW or Mercedes who are doing this kind of individual cars that you can rent via a mobile platform, etc. You are currently targeting the fleets, so like Sixt or something like that, and helping them to manage their fleet more efficiently, so they don't need have to that much contact between their sales organization and their end customer. Sure. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it technically works, the product, and when does it get installed? Who does it? How long does it take?
So let's just start with the market segment that you hit on. There are roughly 8 million vehicles in the U.S. that are in fleets, and that is a market that is very, very undeveloped for sharing. All these vehicles are intended to be shared across user groups, but the way they share them is they'll have a metal box on the wall with keys in it, or a few individuals that have the keys in their desk, and they have a piece of paper when they sign these vehicles out. And so because of the barriers of using keys and having no real organization around the sharing of the assets, they don't get shared, and they have far too many vehicles on their lots. We can walk in the door, and from day one, we can offer 20 to 30% savings across their fleet just by helping them share and taking the keys out of the equation. So now instead of a user having to go and find a set of car keys, they just walk to the car and the access is at the door. So really streamlining the use case is essential here. And then what we do technically is we plug into the car's diagnostics port. That allows us to do two things: get power for our device and pull information from the car itself. When our device is powered up, we force the user to interact with it at the door so we know who it is. We are tracking all movements so we know how they use the car. We know if they're abusing the vehicles, we know if they're driving, how they're driving, we know where they're going. So all that information is very important to the fleet manager so that they can get a snapshot, a real data-driven snapshot of how the vehicles are being used, and then make decisions based on that information. So they can, for example, if they see a portion of their fleet that never goes more than 40 miles, why wouldn't they replace that with electric vehicles? That is an efficiency gain and utilization gain. And then through sharing and proper scheduling, we can help push rides together into certain vehicles that are always going to the same place at the same time with the same people. So really optimizing the entire operation on the ground.
So would you say that your plan, based on this kind of big data, is also to provide other services, like you said before, analyzing how the fleet is going?
Absolutely.
And maybe even optimizing insurance contracts based on user groups or car modules, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So what we do is right now we focus on our core model, and then we will, as we grow, offer premium packages to people, so we can help them analyze fleets and slice it in whatever way they want with the data that we have. And we will offer those as premium products, yes.
How did you acquire and convince the first customer? Because I can imagine going to big fleet companies who have 500, 1,000 cars or so, and you are a young startup. How did you convince them?
A couple things. One is we were selling cars originally. When we were doing that, a couple of the big Silicon Valley companies such as Google and Apple, and they were very interested in that local kind of showpiece for mobility. So Google was our very first customer. They wanted to buy cars. We were talking to them for long enough that when we went through our strong pivot and removed the hardware and software to become vehicle agnostic, they saw the intelligence in that decision, and they already have a fleet of 300 or 400 vehicles on their campus, and they said, "Great, let's just start using your devices in our cars." Right. And so that started to progress. That was a great example for us. They're a tremendous customer because they have a truly multimodal fleet, all the way from human-powered bicycles all the way to highway shuttles, big 60-passenger buses, and everything in between. Model S Teslas, Nissan Leafs, electric bikes, normal internal combustion vans. So we're working across a subset of that fleet now, and we hope to expand more. And what that did was give us something to point to and show how it's working, and data that we could pull and analyze and show the benefit of our platform. At one point, they were having trouble getting people to plug in small electric vehicles on their campus. So we just communicated with the users and said, hey, could you please plug the car in when you're done? And amazingly, we went from a 30% plug-in rate to 90% plug-in rate just in a few weeks. So proving to Google that you can change user behavior in a few weeks is magical. And taking that to the general population is very powerful.
Currently, the fleet management companies are having all the cars stored basically in one location, I assume, because there's some kind of per person who needs to check in the people and serve the cars, etc. With your technology, would you say that they can more distribute their cars over the city because they don't need to have this kind of human interaction with the final customer?
So it's an interesting conversation because right now the fleets are very distributed. There are a lot of use cases where there are one or maybe two users per vehicle, and then you have a piece of the fleet that is very centralized, and they call that the motor pool. And so what we're trying to actually do is to take the entirety of the fleet, regardless of where it's located, and put it in a centralized motor pool, so that no matter where you are on the ground, in the city of San Francisco, for example, you as a user could access the vehicles that you have the right to access with just your badge. And so looking at it from kind of a geographically agnostic perspective, saying you have access to a centralized motor pool regardless of where it is very powerful. And giving the managers the ability to restrict usage, because you don't want me driving a dump truck, right? I don't have the license or the ability. And so the people that can and are able to drive those high value assets that require licensing control, the manager can very easily manage that from his laptop or mobile phone. And so the general population can have access to the general population of motor pool vehicles. You can do restrictions, et cetera, and that is a centralized motor pool. But it may be distributed over a city or more, over a state or even a federal government. So,
and the registration or validation of the identity and all the properties of some of the final customers, how is it then done?
So in the States, it's all done around driving licenses. The beauty of working with fleets is that all of that information checking is already done because the company or the organization takes care of that, so we don't have to. What we do is we come in and connect the dots between the services they're already using. For example, most centralized fleets or fleet operators have service providers for maintenance or cleaning that they already use. And what we do is we come in with our platform and we connect those dots more efficiently. So instead of having to fill out a piece of paper that says I need service on this vehicle at this date, and then someone having to go and find the keys and taking it out of service for a week or 2 or 3 so that they can schedule this maintenance, we give them the ability to push a button on their web interface that turns the light on the vehicle red, takes that vehicle out of service, sends the information and the geolocation of the vehicle to the service provider, who can go straight to the car with their service badge, unlock the doors, drive it to the shop, fix it, and put it back in service. And then the light turns back to green. So really what we do is streamline all of those operations using the existing infrastructure that they already have and just connecting the dots very efficiently.
John, let's talk about corporate strategy. So what do you perceive the competitive advantage of your company?
So right now, to date, there haven't been any of the connected car companies that have focused on the user side. So we obsess about the user side because, as I said, I really feel that in order to make this sharing economy work in the enterprise, you have to have a good user experience at the door. And so, for example, when you tap your badge on our device, it takes less than 2 seconds for the doors to unlock. That's essential, because if you're standing at the door for 2 minutes even, as a user, it feels like days. And people then don't trust the system, they refuse to use it, and you go back to a system where you might as well just be sharing keys. So we obsess about that experience at the door. And then really the scheduling and the utilization increases is what we are pushing today. And like I said, we take the auxiliary systems that they're already using and connect them more efficiently. So for us, we don't want to get down the road too deeply on the telematics side. So for example, DOT compliance or long-haul trucking optimization for fuel, stuff like that that's been done many, many times, and it's a very crowded marketplace. We're focused really on the user experience and centralized motor pools for now. That's our core model. We're only 35 people, so we have to pick an area that's ripe for disruption, and that's it.
Can you explain your go-to-market strategy and your product strategy going forward?
Sure. So our go-to-market strategy has always been focus on what we're good at. And again, to reiterate, is the user side. So going forward, we will just continually expand our product offering, looking at new technologies, looking at more interesting and simplified ways for users to gain access through different sensor technology, through different near-field communication technology, whether it's NFC, Bluetooth, or RFID. We're just going to leverage what our users have already in their pocket. So we don't want to force them to use something new. And going forward, we will start expanding more and more across other geographic areas. For example, we have an office in Paris right now with 5 employees, and we're focused on the European fleet market as well. So I feel that in a lot of ways, the European market is already primed and ready for the sharing economy, because there's a lot more use of mass transit. There's a lot more sense for sharing across large groups of high dollar assets. The car economy there is or the way that corporate executives have their own assigned cars is starting to change. People want to have more cash up front, but still options for mobility down the road. So that's screaming out for centralized motor pools. So we're very excited about the expansion across Europe as well. And that's how we'll expand in the next 12 months.
Can you explain your reasoning why you are internationalizing within the same business segment, while not adding further business segments like individual cars, etc.?
I feel it's really essential to have a strong toehold on the user side and centralized motor pool, and then expand out from there. My co-founder is French, and so we had a very strong connection to talent in France. And we, like I said, we see the European market as very ripe as well. So we wanted to get a toehold as soon as possible. And so we just took our exact same business model and expanded it into the European market.
So let's talk about the market development. I mean, you have learned a lot of in the case of mobility. Can you give us some kind of trends that you identified, without talking about the sharing economy, because you shared some knowledge of that already?
Sure. So if I was speaking straight to, and I do very frequently speak straight to OEMs, and a lot of the innovation experts here in Silicon Valley come to us and say, hey, what do we do to be competitive in the future? And I just look straight at them and say, sell mobility and stop selling so many cars. And that's a very tough thing to understand from the perspective of someone selling cars, but really that's kind of the gist of it. I feel that in the near future, the companies that make mobility valuable are the ones that will win, and that innovative process will stand out as you make each ride or each minute in a car more valuable than having a car sitting on your driveway 85-90% of the time unused. So really sharing is the core of that, and selling mobility is the way that this economy will expand going forward.
Do you see that the American culture is changing somehow? Because when you are driving on 101 or 85, almost every car is occupied by only one person. Everybody has a super large car, and there's some kind of, let's say, the streets are full of cars.
Absolutely, but there are also great trends right now for young people who are waiting longer and longer to get their driving license. So, for example, in my era, you went out and on your 16th birthday you got your driving permit, and on 16 and a half you were in line to get your driving license. On the day you could get it. Now kids are waiting until they're 17, 18 to get their driving license, because they are treating mobility as they treat applications and mobile devices. They want everything on demand right now and at their fingertips. They don't want to have to deal with the responsibility and the cost of owning a vehicle. It's painful these days. And so I think the models are shifting. Right now, the infrastructure isn't built. And so the Bay Area is a great example. We have the Caltrain, which in America is amazing. But if you go to any other country in the world, a 40, or I guess it's, a 30-year-old train is kind of laughed at.
Yeah.
So it's great because we have it here, but it's also very limiting because that's all we have here. So trends are happening now, which are changing that. And of course, it happens slowly, but we're doing what we can now. And that's why we're not waiting for the OEMs to put the hardware in the cars. We're making it ourselves. If they would give us access through API to the hardware that existed in the cars, it would simplify and speed this up, but that's not going to happen for 5 to 10 years. So we're doing it ourselves.
over the last years, what have been your major learnings that you can share with other first-time entrepreneurs?
I think one of the biggest learnings that we had in the early days is first of all, don't be too attracted to your first business model because it's going to change. and second, find your product market fit and go out and get customers. So I think one of the mistakes that entrepreneurs make, and I was very close to making this mistake, which is a fatal mistake for your company, is getting too wrapped up around what your first idea is. In my mind, the definition of a startup is an entity that can pivot their business model until they find something that sticks, something that's needed in the market right now, something that you can sell to customers regardless of your size. And we were able to find that and sell that and gain revenue with our early prototypes. And we've done that now for 3 years. We've been able to gain revenue and push our vehicle ideas and our entrepreneurial ideas into the marketplace while gaining revenue and testing our devices. And now we have a product that's scalable and ready to go, and we just started hiring salespeople. So we focused on products. We found product market fit. We've been around since 2010, and we just started hiring salespeople 3 months ago. So we obsessed about the products. We obsessed about how to make that product work in the marketplace and found our niche and landed, and now we're expanding. So really finding that product market fit and knowing that people want it and are willing to pay for it is essential.
And what advice can you give somebody who is thinking about a product-based company and then is thinking about how should he develop his product? Is there any kind of a recipe that you can provide?
I think simplification is the key. We're a great example. I'm a mechanical engineer and can build a car, but that doesn't mean you should. Really take the idea and strip it down and try to understand fundamentally why you're doing what you're doing. Having a vision for solving problems in mobility and jumping to what you're good at is a way to get great ideas. But again, being fluid with how those ideas flow around the problem and finding the area of least resistance for your product to get into the market is the key.
Great. John, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And the next time you are starting your company, focus on the simplicity of your product and not make it over complex. Thank you very much. Great.
Cool.
John, thank you very much.
Sure.